Welcome to my brand new sewing YouTube channel where I will show you how to make all of these beautiful 1960s fashions. In today's video, we will be making a 1960s pleated dress, which is view A of McCall's 6396. I cannot wait to start sewing it. It is very pretty, but I have no ribbon to do the bow belt. And so for the fabric, I will be using a slightly sheer cotton, dark floral, and it is very, very comfortable, very soft, very smooth, and it doesn't have any stretch to it, which I like, and it doesn't fray very easily, which I also like, and it will make a very, very nice dress. The first steps I always take when I am making these patterns is to iron out the creases in the 60-year-old patterns that I use. They are pretty old for paper documents, so I like to make sure that they're very, very clean and neat so that I can cut them out very, very exact. I made sure when I was cutting to get all of those notches cut and all of the skirt panels cut because there are a lot of skirt panels in this pattern. I've never used so many skirt panels to make a dress. There were at least 12 pieces of the skirt, and then I think there were 17 pieces of the entire pattern, so it was a lot for me to cut out. And after I did all of that, I made sure to mark all of the pieces that I needed to, which were just the darts, and I think that was it actually, just the darts, and I think there were 2 darts on the neckline and the dart tucks. And I can confirm that there were actually 4 darts in the back, 2 on the waistline and 2 on the neckline in the back, and then on the front there were, the 2 dart tucks. I really, really like them now. I only want to do patterns with them now because the way the dress turned out, it just looks gorgeous. And so here I am doing the dart tucks. They look very nice on the finished dress, like I literally just said. And they're just so elegant, and they make it very form-fitting. I love. They call it fit and flare now. I don't really like that term, but that's what it is. I love patterns like this with sleeves called kimono sleeves, which are sleeves that are already part of the bodice. You don't have to cut any extra pieces that you would have to then sew into an armhole. So this pattern is very, very simple. And all I had to do was sew those 2 top seams, then the side seams, which are also connected to the sleeve by a little curve in the under the arm. And so after I sewed that in, all I had to do was iron that out a little bit and move on. This pattern was extremely simple. As you can see, I am going under that curve, and then I came back to that after I sewed the other side with some reinforcing stitches so that it wouldn't come undone, because I have had dresses in the past with this technique that I did not reinforce under the arm. That ended up ripping, and it took me a good bit to sew it back together. It was just a mess. Then I moved on to the neckline facing, which there are 2 pieces for the neckline facing that you sew together. But for the armholes, or the sleeves, you don't have to have that. That's just a hem, an invisible hem. And then I took the facing and pinned it to the neckline and sewed that in. This pattern, again, is very, very simple, and I enjoyed making it very, very much. It ended up turning out so pretty for Easter, and it was done just in time, so I'm so glad that I got it done. Then I went over to the ironing board and sewed down that facing. I clipped around the edges and just put some notches in so that it would bend better. Then I took my iron over it and made sure that that seam was only visible on the inside, so that on the outside it looked very, very neat and clean and seamless. I did this around the whole thing, then pinned it in place off camera. And I like to baste down all of these edges of facings before I sew them down by hand with an invisible stitch, so that just the process goes along much smoother, and I finish up with some nice hand sewing. I had this to do to the neckline, and then later on to the sleeves, which are also done this way. They're actually hemmed, but with an invisible hem that I basted down first. And I like doing all of these edges this way so that they just look nice and clean, and I don't like hemming necklines. It's just not very pretty. So there you can see I am basting down the top edge of that facing, and I didn't understitch it like you're supposed to, but then I moved on to the skirt seams and all of the panels that go along with it, and that took me a good bit because there were at least 8 seams to do, and the skirt is not short. It is just below the knee, which is what I like. I should have swapped out the needle for a Microtex needle, which is thinner and sharper than regular needles, because the fabric pulled in some places, so I should have swapped that out when I first noticed it, but I did not. But it ended up fine in the end, and I don't even notice it anymore. Then the last thing I did to the skirt for now was just sew up those pleats. I did those off camera for some reason, and I just basted them down so they don't move around. Then I pinned up the bodice to the skirt and started sewing that up. And it was a very, very short seam. I'm not used to doing them so quickly, but it turned out so pretty. And again, I should have swapped out the needle because it pulled a little bit on some of these seams, but I really don't mind it, and it turned out really well. Then I sewed in the zipper, which I use an invisible zipper. I am supposed to use a placket zipper for these patterns because invisible zippers were not invented yet, but I just went ahead, I just use invisible zippers on all projects because they are very neat and very seamless. Then after I finished all of these seams, I hand sewed down the facings, which there are 3, one at the neckline and 2 sleeves, so 2 facings on each sleeve. I did this very slowly, so I had to speed up the video because it was just going to take way too long. Then I did the armhole hems, which armholes on these types of dresses are, of course, connected to the dress, like I said. So they're just so much more fun to do than regular sleeves, which I still enjoy the sleeves. But then I headed on to taking all of those basting seams out, and it's very satisfying. And then I headed on to the hem of the whole dress, which circular hems, I'm not necessarily great at those. So I just ironed it and pleated the excess fabric and ironed it down. And then I folded it under again and sewed it down with the sewing machine, then did it by hand. Here is the dress completely finished. I am very, very happy with how it turned out, and I love the fabric. Thank you so much for watching, and please subscribe.